Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. And I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. Yes, we're going to be talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Needless to say, we do have some other updates, even a couple of Harris campaign updates. I see some comments coming in. We'll get to those in just a little bit. Sorry, I checked a little bit late. Here's one. Liberal Democrats in action. Mom arrested for letting her 11-year-old son walk less than a mile to the store. I remember when similar nonsense started. It was about 35 or 40 years ago when my 6-year-old nephew was suspended from school for playing cowboys and Indians. The school officials citing that he was using his hand to emulate a gun. Ridiculous. Yes, I remember when students were getting in trouble. One student, I want to say was suspended. This was years ago for doing using your finger as a gun. There's a reason why Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch mentioned Peanut the squirrel. Yes, tying it in locally. Peanut the squirrel, who became so famous the week before and week of the election, right from Pine City. Now being mentioned by the Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. In a speech at the Federalist Society's annual dinner, he name-dropped by saying, quote, I've just seen too many cases like that. You have to just the other day, some of you might have seen one in the newspaper, if the newspapers are to be believed. He said, yes, I'm speaking of Peanut the squirrel. So now being brought up by none other, and I think that ties in very much to what that viewer's saying, this government overreach, every aspect of government in our life. Speaking of which, that wasn't where I was going to start, but I appreciate the comment. Let's talk about something we have not mentioned in a little while, but I always look forward to giving you an update. We talk about the importance of local elections, and I think we did, not to pat ourselves on the back here, but I think we did a very good job of getting you the information you needed to know before you headed to the voting booth at the local level. Obviously, we talked a lot about the national level, and I think you were well informed on that by the time you entered the booth. But there's always questions because of the media landscape today about the local candidates. So we had a lot of judicial candidates, but we had across the board. And the reason we do that is because, well, first of all, I think it's very informative, but also because local can affect you the most directly. It's what affects your day-to-day life, maybe more than you are aware. So it's important to know who you're voting for. You don't just go in there and say, oh, I think I went to school with him, or I think I remember her from school, whatever the case may be. That's not enough. You need to be informed, or you'll be stuck with someone like self-proclaimed Super Mayor Tiffany Henyard. Yes, it's time for a Tiffany Henyard update. She has called the cops on workers that were removing her banners. Now, I know I've mentioned these banners before, and there's been various ones. Sometimes they're for certain holidays like Valentine's Day, and many have equated them to kind of like a North Korea type scenario where you have a Kim Jong-un as supreme leader, posters hanging up everywhere. And I've never been able to do a good job maybe of explaining them, or maybe I did. It's a visual program here. So luckily, the New York Post has provided this picture. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it. There are the banners welcoming you in to Dolton, Illinois. If you can't read it, it's a little blurry. It says, welcome to Dolton, Super Mayor, with her signature, Tiffany Henyard. Of course, that's a picture of her. Well, she called the cops on workers removing the banners. Well, why were they removing the banners? The vendors claim it's owed nearly $20,000 and has not been paid for these banners to be hanging. Footage obtained by NBC5 Chicago showed the controversial leader asking for charges to be filed against the village administrator and possibly even the workers removing the signage at the behest of the village's dissenting trustees. Now, we know that this area has been hemorrhaging money because of her lavish spending. When they wanted to do an audit, she vetoed the audit. She's being quoted as saying, press charges on him, and they just in the middle of it, but if I got to press charges on them too, because they're taking government property down. She's told the officer on going way back to September 23rd. The news is just hitting. The flashy banners were given back to Henyard's team after the acting police chief, Ronald Burge Sr., showed up. The banners were reportedly put along a main road in Dolton over the summer, but the vendor who supplied them claimed her company hadn't been paid. Dawn Harmon of Mosca Design told the station she's owed nearly $20,000 from the village. It's very frustrating. It's something we did based on her calling and taking her word and signed documents. We have implemented some changes to prevent this in the future. They may not have the money in the coffers. That's how much she spent. Now, an attorney for Henyard declined to comment. Opposing Dolton trustees slammed the mayor in a statement saying, Mayor Henyard's continued practice of engaging vendors without authority or board approval is deeply concerning. This disregard for proper protocol serves only to promote her personal agenda while unfairly burdening taxpayers with the costs. Now, if you recall, as I mentioned, there's been signage and posters touting herself around the area. Though it has led one resident telling the Post back in February it's the behavior of dictators like Maduro. Henyard has battled critics over the past year against allegations she misused taxpayer funds and mismanaged municipal businesses. Also, there were some issues of strong-arming and using the police force as her personal security. She has started gearing up, by the way, for her re-election campaign. Yes, she's running for re-election. So maybe we'll have years more of updates from what some residents call the Dolton dictator, but I prefer Super Mayor Tiffany Henyard. Always important to know what you are voting for. Okay, another couple of quick updates here. We learned, and I brought it to you earlier in the week, that there was I guess, I don't know if you want to say a boss. I don't remember the exact level, but there was a member of FEMA, a person that worked for FEMA, that was fired because she told workers for FEMA not to go to houses that were devastated during the hurricanes, not to go to those houses because if they had any type of Trump paraphernalia, if there's flags, yard signs, anything like that. Now, the New York Post, and this is going to tie in with a larger picture of what we'll talk about here in a little bit about what the media is going through with President-elect, soon-to-be President Trump. We'll tie that in. But back on October 4th, the New York Times said, quote, the former president falsely accused the Biden administration of neglecting hurricane victims in areas that had voted for Republicans. Now, fast forward to last Saturday, FEMA fires employee for telling Milton relief workers to skip houses with Trump signs. So once again, the media, quote, fact checks President-elect Donald Trump on something only for him later to be proven 100% right. FEMA employees were being told to discriminate against GOP voters. And now we learn that FEMA is being sued over those revelations that the agency deliberately ignored homes of Trump supporters. They interviewed some residents in that area that had Trump signs up and flags up, and they said, yeah, we never saw anybody from FEMA. FEMA's disaster of its own making keeps getting worse. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody is suing current and former Federal Emergency Management Agency officials, claiming they, quote, conspired to interfere with the civil rights of Trump voters, end quote, in the state by withholding aid in the aftermath of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. The bombshell lawsuit follows alarming revelations as workers were given orders to avoid dozens of homes of Trump supporters in Lake Placid in a shocking display of political favoritism. And they said that this was common. They've had whistleblowers that work for the FEMA organization that said this is just the tip of the iceberg. So even though those Trump supporters are very much taxpayers supplying the paycheck to those FEMA employees saying don't go and help Trump supporters. The scandal came to light after FEMA fired agency supervisor Marnie Washington, who later claimed that systemic discrimination at the disaster relief agency was colossal, both in Florida and beyond, and alleged she had been made a scapegoat by the agency. Quote, hurricane season is now over and the federal agency in charge of emergency response is embroiled in scandal, caught withholding aid from storm victims in Florida who support President Trump, Moody said in a press release. I'm taking swift legal action to find out how far this political discrimination reaches and to make sure all Americans who fall victim to devastating storms are served regardless of their political affiliation. By the way, Highlands County, where Lake Placid is located, went 70% for President-elect Trump in the election. A FEMA official backed up Washington's claims, telling the Post the agency's practice of skipping Trump-supporting homes or avoiding, quote, white or conservative-dominated disaster zones altogether is an open secret at the agency that has been going on for years. I guess the biggest problem this time, they got so arrogant while being so ignorant that they put it in a text. They put it in writing. In her announcement of Washington's termination, FEMA Administrator Deanna Criswell, who's named as a litigant in the legal action, called the directive to skip homes based on political affiliation, violated the agency's, quote, core values and principles, end quote, and vowed to do everything she could to ensure it never happened again. So that's just an update from a story that we brought to you earlier in the week, and it's a tie-in with the media there, fact-checking incorrectly Donald Trump, which I'd say buckle up. We're going to get a lot of that the next 4 years. There's going to be a lot of fact-checking used for propaganda purposes, much like what we saw with the ABC moderators during the debate between President Trump and Vice President Harris. We're going to talk about that because we mentioned yesterday that ABC is in a tizzy trying to find Trump-supporting panelists to be on The View. But as the New York Post editorial board put it, the bias problem goes way deeper than just The View. And we'll talk about that when we come back. Just getting warmed up on this Friday edition of Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Must have been just enough wind to get us back on track with the normal angle. I would like to say that someone went up and did that, but I honestly cannot say that. That is complete wind. So we're going to have some different views the windier it gets, I guess. Welcome back. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on historic Market Street, which you just saw from the roof cam. So a couple comments from viewers. If they object to Kennedy's policies or credentials, Democrats need to go through proper channels. Right, there is mechanisms for this. You're right. Republicans were quenched after Democrats' outlandishness. It's our turn at the wheel now. That's what drives them the craziest. They don't like that. There is the trifecta, folks. I mean, that and the popular vote. If we're going to talk about the bias in the media, and I'm going to go, don't worry, to the other comment. I'm going to get that in a second. But just to piggyback off what you said, if we were going to talk about the bias in the media, and it's our turn at the wheel now. Jim Acosta on CNN, remember CNN looking to lay off hundreds because of their after-election coverage and election night coverage, ratings plummeting. Jim Acosta said on Wednesday, quote, Trump is claiming a popular vote victory that did not occur. Now, I'm not the best at math, but last I checked, 75.6 million is more mathematically than 72.4 million as of last count. So yes, Trump did win the popular vote. Now, is this just complete bias? Is this wishful thinking? Well, after Jim Acosta said it, in full disclosure, political director David Challen immediately corrected Acosta, saying that Trump's popular vote win simply didn't occur to the size Trump claimed. Okay, so another fact check, I guess. Gone awry. But yes, we won the popular vote. Donald Trump won the White House. The Republicans won the House and the Senate. So it is our turn at the wheel, and that is why you are seeing the media and activists in a tizzy. Another comment from a different viewer. Democrats are starting their garbage right over again. If they cared about this country, they would let Trump do his job. Here's the problem. I think there are people, listen, you can't be indoctrinated with hate for all these years since Trump went down the golden escalator and get over it in a night. I mean, I think there are some that are waking up, don't get me wrong, But there is a level of hatred out there. I mean, hence the 2 assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump, now President-elect. He's got a lot of titles. And then future president again. Hey, here's a good comment. I can read this live on the fly. And just like that, Trump is making roof cams great again. Yes, somehow we will give Trump full credit for getting that back on the right track. That Trump, of course, and Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your home and business security needs. But yes, like that comment. Thank you. But back to the bias in the media. We know that the media has, in the Trump era, quote, abandoned all principles to elect Democrats. The New York Times admitted it back in 2016, that once he secured the nomination, that nothing was off limits to bring down Trump. ABC News, which tried to rig the presidential debate by fact-checking Trump while repeatedly letting Kamala Harris slide. Yes, Kamala Harris was allowed to bring up false information like Project 2025. The list will go on and on. I'm not going to relitigate the debate. But it was admitted at the time that the moderator said, we practiced every kind of avenue he could go down so we'd be ready to fact check, but not Harris. But now top brass are trying to bring in more conservative voices. And action item number 1 is to balance out the lefty insanity spotted by hosts on The View. That, of course, and many people on this program the day after the election saying it's the first time ever that they've wanted to tune into The View or looking forward to tuning into The View to see the reactions. It is known to be far left. I think one of the problems and why they're probably struggling to find pro-Trump voices for The View is because it is kind of a death knell for your career. I mean, it's tough to get on there and be shouted at and screamed at by 4 to 5 other hosts, the 1 versus 5 idea. These include, though, of course, Whoopi Goldberg blaming inflation on grocery store owners, whom she called pigs, and woke racist Sonny Hostin telling people to cut off loved ones if they vote for Trump and blaming, quote, uneducated white men for his victory, ignoring the huge inroads he made in so many demographics. And that's just in the past couple of weeks. Yes, the show features a couple right-leaning people. I don't know how to say her name. Elisa Farrah Griffin and Anna Navarro. But they're reliably anti-Trump. Yes, I believe everybody on that panel, and I don't want to spend too much time on The View here, endorsed Harris. So they're not what you consider actual Republicans. They're kind of just put that title on your name and they can hire you. So it's good news that executives at the network are trying to even things out. And this is why I bring up this piece from the New York Post editorial board. Trouble is, The View is not the problem. Sure, it's annoying when C-listers form a coup-friendly coffee clutch. Yes, there are obvious elitists. Witness Goldberg's recent moaning about having to work for a living. ABC must have stocked the wrong kind of dressing room snacks, or maybe her limo driver was insufficiently worshipful. But The View is a talk show, not a news program. And ABC's real issue is its news coverage that leans just as far left as Sonny and Whoopi. Anyone who saw the shenanigans at the debate knows that. Anyone who's seen any ABC coverage at all over the past 8 years knows that. So by all means, bring on a smart, funny, pro-Trump woman. There's a plethora to choose from. Well, unless you're Mark Cuban and there are no strong, intelligent MAGA women, Trump-supporting women. But then apply that even-handed thinking to the network as a whole, and who knows, you might actually start repairing the public's devastated trust in journalism. And there's so many examples of why people no longer trust the media. They no longer, and the poll, Gallup actually has it. Think about that. You know, it's always a joke, well, that person's not as popular as Congress, because Congress was always the lowest bar. Media has now went below that bar, according to recent Gallup, not even recent, continuing Gallup polls. They're not trusted. The bias is so prevalent, and they kind of revel in it. They love it because in their world, they're supported for it. In their bubble, they're getting pats on the back for their anti-Trump stances. They're not even concerned with the ratings drops and the firings, because the firings are probably not them, the media elites, the people on The View. It's, probably underlings that they deem as unnecessary or perhaps even unworthy. That's how egotistical, because that's why you'll see, I mentioned it time and time again, watching election night coverage where they were talking to you as if obviously you supported Kamala Harris, so they're going to help you understand how Harris can still win. It was really, I'm not going to say stunning, it was expected, but it was almost like, do you remember, and they may still do it, but during March Madness, you could watch one channel, let's say, that was just neutral, that was just announcers calling the game, and then you could watch a channel for each of your teams. So if you were a Syracuse fan, you could tune in and watch Syracuse, and it would be their kind of a home court announcers, and everything that Syracuse did was great, and everything the other team did was horrible. That's what it felt like tuning into the mainstream media, that, okay, welcome to the pro-Harris election night coverage. We know you're a Harris supporter, so here, let me show you what could still happen, those type of things. That's how bad it became at one point when I was watching it. Speaking of media, well, we got a couple other media things, reading your comments when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Boss Security Roof Cam. Contact them today for all your home and business security needs. Here's a comment as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. I'd like to get your take on this. I'd also like to get your take on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I know yesterday we had someone asking, do you think he'll still be put in this position? I didn't know as of yesterday, obviously, yesterday morning, if he would or not, because there had been concerns, much like with Matt Gaetz, whether or not he can survive the nominating process, survive the whole confirmation hearing is probably a better word that I should have used. So I wasn't sure if maybe they were trying to put him in a different position like a health czar or something like that. But nope, Trump went and did it. So what are your thoughts? Now, here's a comment from a viewer. My wife tells me that Matt Gaetz has creepy eyes like Jack Nicholson, not the golfer, the actor, Jack Nicholson. But that might be the look that is needed as Attorney General. Yeah, that stone, not far away. What's the word that you would look at? That kind of stony-eyed, I guess. That's a good point. I never really thought about it, but now that you say it, I suppose so. Oh, by the way, there's a report out, just a couple quick Harris updates, and then we are going to get into obviously the nominations. There are so many people that Trump continues to add. We'll take a look at some of the positions he still has yet to fill, and we'll tell you the media is in all-out attack mode on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, I've said on this program numerous times, it was fascinating during the campaign to see the media attack a Kennedy. Just fascinating. Something I thought would never be done. Until, I guess I never thought a Kennedy would actually go and support Trump or Republican. So the long knives continue to be out. Jake Tapper having almost a breakdown over the nomination. We'll talk about it, saying something to the extent, I'm paraphrasing, we'll get to it later, but I hope you all enjoy measles now. But before that, it is being reported that Kamala Harris decided to scrap the Joe Rogan interview over fears of a far-left backlash. And I know there's been many in the Democrat Party of the talking heads. I think Bill Maher was one of them, right? I can't remember which one it was, that was specifically saying we've got to give up on worrying about alienating the far left because, I think it was the one that used to work for Bill and Hillary Clinton, the one advisor, saying, enough with that. You have to try to secure as many votes as you possibly can, not worry about losing the fringe element. But she ran a campaign that was like that. That's why many people speculated that she didn't pick Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania because that he is Jewish, and with the fear that now with that marbling of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party, as Van Jones put it, that there would be a backlash amongst that far left fringe. So this sounds like it tracks, right? The far left often opposes platforms that encourage debate, the exchange of ideas, and the destruction of speech codes, which is what Joe Rogan does. Jennifer Palmieri, a senior advisor to Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, said there was a backlash with some of our progressive staff that didn't want her to be on it, and how there would be a backlash. I don't know. You've got the most popular podcast, which is in many cases overtaking, if not already, the mainstream media. And you don't go because you're afraid it will alienate some, but you're reaching a voting block that you would not normally reach. Because remember, she was not doing a lot of media. She was doing some interviews towards the end, but not doing a lot of media. And the media that she was doing was very Harris friendly. You know, The View, that podcast, Call Her Daddy, other things that were already Stephen Colbert, her base. So how does she, and her rallies aren't going to reach the people that were maybe undecided or on the fence about voting for Trump. So Rogan would have been a perfect scenario, one that they did not take. And much to the chagrin of the Harris campaign, ultimately, they did not take it because of that running scared. They ran the whole campaign scared. But Joe Rogan has since said on his podcast that he has had artists, musicians, comedians come up and thank him for endorsing Trump because they can't do it because they'd be attacked. There's a lot of people that don't speak their mind, Rogan said. So you know how many artists that have reached out to me that are these blanking hippies, man? Like artists, like musicians, comedians, that thanked me for endorsing Trump because they couldn't do it. They said they want to, but they don't want to get attacked. They can't say it. They think the country's going in the wrong direction. They think that it's in control of social media by the government, which we would have pretty much fully if it wasn't for Elon Musk buying Twitter. This is a dangerous precedent to set, whether it's a right-wing government or a left-wing government. And what you see that's happening in the UK, where people are being imprisoned for tweets and Facebook posts, I think it's interesting because you hear this time and time again where people like Rogan, and Rogan is in a unique position because he is so popular that he can speak his mind. So when he endorses Trump, he's not, he'll be attacked by people that he doesn't really care about, you know, the MSNBCs of the world or these far left people that Harris was concerned about alienating if she did an interview with Rogan. But overall, it's not going to hurt him. And so basically the people that they don't have that kind of say, or they may not have that kind of standing, saying, thank you for doing this. I wish I could. And we've heard that time and time again from many people, that there are some in Hollywood, some actors, some musicians, some artists that are very conservative, but are fearful for their jobs. Because look, going back to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., like we were talking about, his wife was being attacked for not speaking out more against Trump. Now, it wasn't her who endorsed Trump. It was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And there was an actor who said, I'll never work with you again type scenario. Or you better be careful for your job. That kind of threatening, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You're still in Hollywood. You'll be out of a job. And that's why, I don't know if you saw the dinner, I guess it was, a celebration of Trump's victory, his first public appearance since the victory. I don't know if you saw Sylvester Stallone in his ringing endorsement of Donald Trump yesterday. And as someone that likes the show Tulsa Kings, I'm afraid there might not be a season 3 now. He came out in support of Trump. And really, when there are actors, think about that. When there are actors or musicians that come out and say something positive about Trump or Republicans in general, you start to wonder, is this going to be the end of their career? In some instances, it has proven to be the end of careers. Now, a couple other rehashing the 2024 election. It turns out, according to Axios, I believe this was Axios, Chuck Schumer was ridiculed because there's a lot of blame game going on right now. He was attacked essentially by Senate Democrats because they were caught flat-footed by the GOP's, I don't like the wording of this, but we'll go with it, the GOP's anti-trans attack. Outgoing Senate Majority Leader, boy, doesn't that sound good. Let me say that again. Outgoing Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer heard a consistent, urgent alarm this week from Democrats who felt ambushed by GOP attacks on transgender people participating in women's sports, Axios has learned. The losses of Senators John Tester in Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio leave Democrats without a single member representing a truly red state. In 2 private post-mortem meetings attended by Schumer, Democrats said the party was caught flat-footed by the attacks, even as many campaigns aired ads pushing back. The GOP spent over $77 million on ads about transgender issues in U.S. Senate races in 10 states dating back to July. In Ohio alone, a super PAC linked to outgoing Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell spent over $32 million on anti-trans ads. So the bottom line here is several Democrat incumbents told their colleagues the support from the campaign arm of the Senate Democrats and Schumer himself was the best that they had received in any election year, but many saying that they were caught flat-footed and it cost them, ultimately, the Senate. Schumer's talked privately to every caucus member since the election. It is being reported here. So blame. And speaking of blame game, I know we reach into Pennsylvania and welcome and thank you for joining us, our friends from Pennsylvania. Did a good job with your Senate and with the presidency. Fetterman is a Pennsylvania senator. I don't know if he was kind of in our local area and happens to watch Frankly Speaking a lot, but it sounds very reminiscent of something you would hear here on Frankly Speaking. He said, and this is, again, John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, the senator, saying, people like Pelosi, she really tried to, what's the word I'm looking for? She embraced she's the godmother. She's the enforcer. Now, I did reference the godfather. I didn't change it to godmother. And now she's blaming Biden. Well, you can't have it both ways. I think it's really ironic that you have a woman at age 84, meaning Nancy Pelosi, and she's still hanging on. Why not give a younger generation an opportunity to occupy that seat? That's a good point because she ran and ultimately won re-election to her seat at the age of 84. But yes, echoing what we've been saying here, she can't take that whole I did what I had to do mentality when talking about taking out Biden and then later saying, oh man, he should have got out earlier. Okay, we got to take a break. We got so much more to cover. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again to Boss Security in Horseheads for bringing us the roof cam. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. A lot of great comments from viewers as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. RFK Jr., this is from a viewer, of course. RFK Jr. is actually representative of the old school Democrat mindset of a more natural, less farm and chemical world, back when there was less critical disease and illness. I think it started with allowing drug commercials on TV. Perhaps we can go back to the laws against them. Yeah, what's nice is he's not beholden to Big Pharma. It's interesting how everybody hated Big Pharma. Everybody on the left hated Big Pharma until COVID, huh? Isn't that kind of interesting? But that's what's kind of nice, an outside perspective. Now, again, it's going to be a tough nominating process. Let's not be naive. A confirmation process, I should say. Keep messing those two up. It's not going to be easy. But it's nice that he doesn't, because so many people in Washington make so much money from Big Pharma. That it will be nice to have someone with that outside voice. Next up, he, meaning RFK Jr., is correct when he says the Democrat Party left him. It sure did. Thank you very much. Another comment. Back when I was a kid, there was only a couple vaccinations needed. Now you no longer have fingers to count how many they want you to take. That's for sure. Finally, another comment. Since you have mentioned how much money was spent for a campaign, how many commercials can be bought for, say, $10 million? Do you happen to have an idea of the breakdown? No, that would be nearly impossible, only because each station is different. Radio, TV, there's certain rules that the FCC makes you follow. And it's a lowest unit rate for certain spots. It gets very kind of really wonky in the weeds and not something you would find that interesting, if I'm being honest. So you can't just say this is how many ads $10 million buys, because $10 million in ads in a city in Pennsylvania is going to cost a lot more. You're going to get a lot less commercials than you would for a New York that isn't in play, let's say, or for a smaller station with less ratings in Pennsylvania. It's all depends on the station and what they've been charging other ads, because it has to be fair. Like I couldn't charge you, if you're the Harris campaign, I couldn't charge you $10,000 a spot and then let Trump get a spot for $100. Everything has to be equal, and it's based on, I believe it's called lowest unit rate, which is kind of a this is what we charge the smallest advertiser with us, and this is what we have to give you. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's just a breakdown. So there's no way to really break that down. But I know people that were working in North Carolina in media and at a smaller radio station, not the biggest one in the market, the biggest one in the market, making basically their whole budget for the year, and then the other smaller station getting a really good chunk as well. So it's really interesting how that all works. You can take, and I'm not exaggerating, you can take classes on it. I did back in the radio days. You can sit in symposiums and hear all about the best way to handle political advertising. So there is no way to break that down, but it's a great question. I wish there was. A couple quick things before we go to another break. After Trump's White House visit, and I think this is a good point, Charlemagne, Charlemagne that's been really instrumental in this election too. He did interview Harris, and he's been pretty outspoken about some criticisms of the Democrat Party, but ultimately endorsing Harris, if I'm not mistaken. He talked about Biden and Trump meeting. He said, I just don't understand the White House visit. Now, granted, I'm glad it's a peaceful transition of power. But what happened to the threat of democracy talk? What happened to the fascist talk? By the way, I know I've said those things about Trump as well, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about his political opponents, like President Biden. When they say it holds way more weight than me, I'm just trying to figure out, how do you go from he's an existential threat to democracy to welcome back? As a co-host remarked, Biden seemed happy too. He was happy, he was smiling, he was grinning. Listen, you know my thoughts on this from the beginning, that this does not bother Biden, that Trump won, because he can tell Nancy Pelosi, see, I told you so. You took out the only person with a proven record of beating Trump. You took that person out for Harris, and you lost. And you lost in a landslide fashion. So I think if you watch that press conference when after the election, not press conference, but the address from the Rose Garden, when he was talking about what had happened with the election and the peaceful transfer of power, et cetera, he almost acted like he just won re-election. He was smiling more than we'd seen him smile in a long time. He was talking to members of his staff and the crowd, playing some crowd work. It was, he does seem to be in a very good mood. Last couple things about Harris here I don't have time for. Clashes, confusion, and secrecy consume the Harris campaign finances. Yes, as we know, that's coming from NBC News, crossing the $1 billion mark and spending much, much more. There's some infighting, who made the money, who lined their pockets. And we learned that Oprah got paid $1 million, but she made it clear. Yes, I got paid $1 million, but that was to my production company, and that was for production expenses, not for my appearance. But as her hometown newspaper, the Chicago Tribune, said, frankly, $1 million is not all that much to Winfrey. And so we very much doubt that she was seeking any kind of personal payday from her chosen candidate. But she does own Harpo, which is her production company, and serves as its chairwoman and CEO. The production fees should have been a campaign donation. Yeah, so as she was trying to take this high road, well, why not make a donation to the campaign of saying, no, I'll cover the production costs, right? The money was spent, and this is why there's so much confusion and anger, on the town hall events with Harris, which featured Julia Roberts, Meryl Streep, Jennifer Lopez, Bryan Cranston. Reports on campaign spending indicate that of the $15 million spent on production fees in total, $1 million went to Harpo. We learned that quite a bit of money. We've heard that $5 million was given to Megan Thee Stallion for her campaign performance. So you're really paying for what I think most of us, I guess naively, thought were endorsements. $5 million to have someone perform, which, again, I would have thought was an endorsement. But no, it was, hey, I'll pay. I'll pay to play. One former Biden staff member said, how did you spend $1 billion and not win? What the heck, we'll say. Well, it was more than that. We learned that she's some $20 million in debt on top of the $1 billion. And there's confusion as to where all the money went, how it was not more effectively used. So there we go. Oh, and okay, a couple quick things on this. We are going to get to the confirmation. I'm sorry, we had so much to catch up on. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back. There's our roof cam in the right direction. Sponsored by Boss Security in Horsets. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. The New York Times has admitted that the celebrity endorsements, quote, may have backfired in this election. Well, what we're learning is that they're not really even endorsements. There are some. Obviously, there are some. But some of these performances cost Harris money. $5 million for Megan Thee Stallion? What? The Times saying that though Donald Trump enjoyed the support of Kanye West, Mel Gibson, Jon Voight, and Kid Rock, but by and large, the biggest names in entertainment backed Harris, and it did not seem to matter much. It wasn't always this way. Celebrity endorsements used to seemingly carry substantial weight, with influential figures like Oprah Winfrey helping to magnify lesser-known candidates such as Barack Obama in 2008. But that sway seems to have lessened as influencers, one-time micro-celebrities, and podcasters like Joe Rogan, a former comedian, largely libertarian, political views, have gained bigger audiences. It's actually the more digitally native influencers who are able to leverage their status content and distribution channels that move the needle, said one Democrat operative. So actually the elitist mentality, it goes on to say, I'm paraphrasing, ends up backfiring when it comes to celebrity endorsements. Now the left is scrambling, and I think this will come as no surprise. The left is scrambling for more resistance funds. You remember the resistance? Resist was a big thing that was being said back in 2016. You saw bumper stickers and signs. Well, liberal groups are gearing up for renewed resistance against President Donald Trump's second term, rallying to re-energize left-wing donors, even as patrons are currently dejected after having blown over $1 billion on the failed Harris-Walz campaign. Boy, Walz, you almost forget about him, don't you? Progressive organizations are preparing for a full-scale resistance against Donald Trump's second term, calling on donors to help fund lawsuits, protests, campaigns, and mass mobilizations aimed at blocking his administration's policies, according to the New York Times. Donors are being asked to double down on funding despite lingering doubts about the effectiveness of the exorbitant amounts already spent. Well, you'll see, and it's going to be interesting to see either on January 6th or January 20th what will happen. We know that there was protests instantly as Trump was not only inaugurated on Inauguration Day, but after the fact as well. So we'll see how this resistance movement shakes up and shapes up, if they're better prepared or less prepared from 2016. All right, now let's get into some of what's happening in Washington. First of all, and I think this is a good move. We heard the vote of confidence for Mike Johnson to be Speaker of the House. And we know last time there was always that threat hanging over any speaker's head that if one vote went away that a small group didn't like, they would put it up for a vote to oust him. Well, according to CNN, the rules package for the House of Representatives in the 119th Congress includes a change to the motion to vacate rule, which derived from an agreement between the House Freedom Caucus and the Main Street Caucus. They write, the conservative House Freedom Caucus and governing-focused GOP Main Street Caucus has been in talks, along with Speaker Mike Johnson, about changes to the motion to vacate. According to the three Republicans involved in the discussion, an internal party rule change would defuse the procedural weapon used to remove Johnson's predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, from power. In exchange, GOP lawmakers would not push for changes that would punish members for voting against rules. If Johnson can successfully raise the threshold, it would eliminate a key problem for him in the next Congress, where CNN projected on Wednesday that Republicans will have a majority in the House. The GOP conference would need to approve the deal on Thursday. Now, the original tool was used to remove former Speaker Kevin McCarthy in October 2023. Former Representative Matt Gaetz, who we'll be talking about in a moment, who resigned Tuesday, filed a motion to vacate the chair in October of 2023. So this will, as they put it, make it 9 times harder to vote to vacate the speaker, which I think we found that the other way was just a little too lax and caused a little bit too much, to use the media's term, chaos on a regular basis. All right, we got to take our last break of hour number 1, and now we're going to talk about the transition team. What do you think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? What do you think? I know the biggest knives are out for him and Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz, interestingly enough. Not interesting enough, just stating it. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Boss Security in Horseheads, called Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Shaping up to be a beautiful morning here on Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. So the Trump transition team. We've got border czar Tom Homan. A lot of people liking the cut of his jib. Tom Homan. We've got Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, as you know. And when I use the term in the future controversial, I'm saying by the media, that these are the ones that the media really don't like. Defense Pete Hegseth, They are, what did John Bolton, again, the narcissist John Bolton say? Something to the extent that he's the least qualified in history. Okay. Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. They don't like her because of her autobiography that she released, or her memoirs. CIA, John Ratcliffe. EPA, Lee Zeldin. There's just not enough. They don't know enough about Lee Zeldin. I've heard some criticism on the left that basically, who is he? Which scares them in a way. For government efficiency, as you know, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. United Nations Ambassador, Elise Stefanik. Now, this is... well, let me ask you this question. First of all, what do you think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? And second of all, who do you think is the most controversial? And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but what I mean by the media. Who in the media and on the left do they hate the most right now? Is it Matt Gaetz? It's probably not Pete Hegseth at this point. Is it Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? I would say, though, it's probably between those two. Matt Gaetz and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Those are the ones that I think will probably have the most difficulty with the confirmation. Also, we posed this question yesterday. Is there anybody that concerns you? And I don't mean, you don't have to be super negative. I know yesterday we had someone that said just they're watching closely Tulsi Gabbard, which I understand because she was a Bernie supporter at one time. I understand that. But what I say about concern, remember, there were so many leaks coming from the White House back in 2016, and there's so many people that ultimately turned on Trump and would release these scathing letters and instantly became irrelevant, by the way, in most instances, or they would get a job at CNN or MSNBC. But is there anybody like that concerns you, that you say, well, my gut feeling is I don't like this? And there won't be a knock on Trump, mind you. It'll just be someone that you're keeping a close eye on. I'd love to hear from you on that. Continuing, like I said, National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee. I like that one. I like all of them. Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff, and then Health and Human Services. So we learned yesterday the big news: Robert F. Kennedy Jr. nominated for that position, and he'll probably be in the next hour. He's who we'll talk about at the top of the hour. Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, and finally Interior, Doug Burgum. That leaves to be filled, and this is a fun time seeing the transition team and what they ultimately decide. You still have energy, agriculture, housing and urban development, education, labor, transportation, treasury, commerce, economic advisors chair, management and budget, science advisor, small business administration, and trade representative. I'll be curious. I feel kind of bad in a way with this pick for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because was it Health and Human Services that Ben Carson wanted? I think that was a position he was hoping for, or at least that's what the rumors were. But still plenty of spots left to follow. Do you think there'll be more quote-unquote standard? Because I like when the headlines will say it was like a bomb went off in Washington. Well, that's what Trump got elected for, to shake up the typical Washington, the as he calls it, the swamp, the deep state, to shake those things up. That it isn't going to be Washington's business as usual. So your thoughts, keep them coming in, because we've got hour number 2 on the way, hour number 1 in the book. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And it's time for hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I am your host, Frank Acom. Thank you for joining us, hopefully for both hours, because we've got a lot to cover. Here's a comment from a viewer. They will have a difficult time convincing us that Trump is not uniting the country. I think he has brought the smartest, best Democrats and common sense back into politics. In one breath, the Democrats speak of unity, and the other calling half the population garbage and a threat to democracy. I think that was one of the biggest issues during the campaign. There's so many big issues. I'm not saying this is what destroyed Harris. But when you get up there and talk about unity, except for 50% of the population that are garbage, how can you unify? You're right. Hey, by the way, just for those looking for a new job, Musk and Ramaswamy, the hunt for DOGE members, the Department of Government Efficiency, has begun. They announced, where else but on X, we are very grateful to the thousands of Americans who have expressed interest in helping us at DOGE. We don't need more part-time idea generators. We need super high IQ, small government revolutionaries willing to work 80 plus hours per week on unglamorous cost cutting. If that's you, direct message this account with your CV. Elon and Vivek will review the top 1% of applicants. So you better get on there. Sign up today. And are they trying to make a controversy about Elon Musk meeting with Iran's UN ambassador? I guess he reportedly had a discussion on ways to diffuse tensions between Iran and the United States. I don't know if this is if they're trying to present this as a bad thing. The Iranians said the meeting between Mr. Musk and the ambassador lasted more than an hour and was held at a secret location. The Iranians, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss policy publicly, described the meeting as positive and good news. I don't know. They'll probably try to spin into something bad. All right, let's talk about the nominees, folks. Did you see yesterday? I wasn't aware it was going on, so obviously I wasn't invited. But that star-studded America First Policy Conference at Mar-a-Lago last night, again, I mean, I really hope this doesn't signal the end of Sylvester Stallone's movie and TV career. He labeled President-elect Donald Trump, quote, the second George Washington, as the actor invoked his movie series Rocky during that event. The 78-year-old Stallone described the opening scene of the first film when the camera pans down from a mural of Jesus inside an old church converted into a boxing ring as Rocky Balboa gets punched by his opponent with the word Resurrection AC Club shown in the background. Quote, at that moment, he was a chosen person, and that's how I began the journey, Stallone said. Something's going to happen. This man is going to go through a metamorphosis and change lives. Just like President Trump, he said, as the audience erupted in cheers. Stallone described Trump as a mythical character, as he was awed by the former and next president's historic election night victory. You know, I got to go back, though. Who was it that said, I was thinking about this the other day, when there's obviously that iconic photo of Trump surviving the first assassination attempt with the blood trickling down his face and his fist pumped in defiance in the air. And someone said, and I think it was someone on the left, saying it's pretty much all over, that no one can have that photo taken and live through that and not end up getting the presidency of the United States. It was that iconic of a photo. And of course, that's why they stopped publishing it. That's why, as reported at the time by Axios, they had said it's becoming pro-Trump propaganda. We can't show it, even though it's a historic, iconic photo. So when you talk about that mythical character, and so you get through that, 2 attempts, at least, on his life, you get through what could only be described as an odd campaign with Biden. That's not any of Trump's doing, except for Trump defeating Biden so soundly in the debate. And to have Stallone say he was awed by the election night victory, because it was a landslide victory. So think of this trajectory. As remember, we heard the trajectory of Kamala Harris and the momentum of Kamala Harris. Think if the media was fair with you and reported the truth. Because was there any more momentum? Was there any more trajectory, example of trajectory than Donald Trump? But continuing, back to what Sylvester Stallone had to say. This individual does not exist on this planet. Nobody could have pulled off what he pulled off, so I'm in awe. This again, Sylvester Stallone. When George Washington defended his country, he had no idea that he was going to change the world. Because without him, you could imagine what the world would look like. Guess what? We got the second George Washington. Congratulations, Stallone said. Stallone and Trump's relationship has been well documented, with rumors that the actor was a possibility to be chairman of the National Endowment of the Arts during his first term in office. I've got to admit, I was not familiar with that friendship or that support. I don't remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys remember, I don't remember the endorsements or giving any speeches. That's why I was so impressed by the speech given last night. Now, the star-studded, I guess he could probably still be chairman of the National Endowment of the Arts this go-around if he wanted to. But anyway, the star-studded Mar-a-Lago event featured well-known Trump supporters and politicians that were announced as members of Trump's new administration. Among the well-dressed individuals were Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Elon Musk, all whom Trump touted in his speech. We'll get to that in a moment. Others in attendance at the Palm Beach Gala were Kennedy's wife, Cheryl Hines. That's interesting to me because remember, she was receiving essentially threats, not of physical nature, but with her job, saying you have not come out enough to denounce your husband's support of Donald Trump. You'll never work in this town again type language. So it's interesting that she attended the event. Don Jr. was there with Kimberly Guilfoyle, and Tucker Carlson was there among many other. Now, you know what's going to probably be the big takeaway, and they'll probably, remember when Trump joked, of course you do, with Hannity about, I'm not going to be a dictator, but just on day one, essentially. And the media said he's going to be a dictator starting day one. For a guy that says so many bad things, allegedly, who says so many inappropriate things and so much negative things, it's so interesting to me how the media have to take everything he says out of context or cut it down or edit it, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, that just made me think, too. Light bulb just went off. Speaking of editing, and as we talked about the ABC earlier, is that who does it? 60 Minutes. Who does 60 Minutes? We're probably never going to. Will we? Now that Trump's in there, though? Will we ever find out how much they edited that interview with Kamala Harris for 60 Minutes? See, they were hoping to run out the clock and not have to release the transcript and release the unedited footage. Will that now change? I hope someone, it's easy to forget these things because there's so much going on. But those are the kind of things that need to be exposed to correct the path that the media is going down, which is the least trusted institution in America. How did I get on that tangent? Because I was saying edited. If Trump is so bad and says such nasty things, why do they always have to edit him, take him out of context with lies like the good people on both sides, that hoax? We can go through a laundry list of them. They always end up lying about what he had to say and then telling you how bad he is. It's like when they create the chaos with a made-up scandal or a phony scandal or a phony this or a phony that. They'll make that and then they'll say, see the chaos he creates, which is the chaos they created. But I'll continue. This is what I'm saying because I believe Donald Trump, they will take this heavily out of context. President-elect Donald Trump quipped that Election Day should be considered the start of his second term, joking that Congress, quote, should pass a bill to make it official. Trump, speaking at the America First Policy Institute Gala, touted that almost every single day since his November 5th victory over Vice President Kamala Harris, the country has, quote, set new records in the stock market. The once and future commander-in-chief argue that those booming economic stats should be counted as coming under his presidency in his historic record. It's not a bad point. We're doing good now, he said at the keynote event. The only thing is, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important. Maybe you should pass a bill. You have to start my term from November 5th, okay? Or November 6th if you want. The market has gone through the roof. Enthusiasm has doubled. It's doubled in the last short time. And they will use that as quote-unquote proof that Biden-Harris left Trump in really good shape. Remember that article I had for you, was it last week or was it early this week, saying that Trump inherited a great economy from Obama, and then now he's going to inherit another great economy from Biden. It's laughable if they weren't so serious, and unfortunately some take them serious as well. The president-elect also teased Johnson about the number of House Republicans he's been plucking out of Congress to serve in the incoming administration. But why I say that'll be taken out of context, Trump wants to change the rules so he can already be president. I mean, if there were still attack ads going right now, that would be on it. I promised Mike Johnson that I wouldn't be taking too many more from Congress before we start counting the votes. Please, could you slow down a little bit, he said. I just like the people in Congress, Mike. I'm sorry, but no, don't worry about it. Hollywood, I mentioned Stallone was there. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Cheryl Hines, Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump Jr., Tucker Carlson, Argentina President Javier Milei, and Matt Gaetz. Going back to what Stallone said, we are in the presence of a really mythical character. Nobody in the world could have pulled off what he pulled off. And then comparing him to the second George, calling him the second George Washington. I got bad news for Stallone, and I think he means well. But the reason I have bad news is he's actually the third coming of George Washington. Of course, we have George Washington. Then, of course, we have Joe Biden. No, wait, that might have changed. Because he was the second coming of George Washington. There's talks of putting him on Mount Rushmore when Nancy Pelosi ousted him and talked about what the amazing decision he made for his country. But now Nancy Pelosi is saying he waited too long and that it's his fault they lost. So I'm not sure. Stallone may technically still be right. There could be an asterisk there because we know there's George Washington. Probably Joe Biden coming in at second with George. He might have been better than the original George Washington. I don't know. We won't rank George Washingtons. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just being a little corny there, folks. But is Joe Biden George Washington anymore? Is he an American hero? Maybe the most consequential president in our lifetimes because he stepped down? Because now we learned he stepped down too late. Nancy Pelosi is now putting the blame on him, even though, to Fetterman's point, and I'll say Fetterman's point, even though I said it like weeks ago, but whatever, that Nancy Pelosi is trying to be the godfather, or she said the godmother, and act like she was the executioner, or whatever word he used, to get Biden out of there. And she was taking all the credit and patting herself on the back. And now that they lost, realizing, as we predicted on this program, saying that she better be careful because if she loses, it's a I told you so moment. And she did. So now she, of course, can't take the blame. She's been in Washington too long. So she blames Joe Biden. So the person that she hopes she can reconcile with, this goes to show you how phony Washington is, right? I hope we can reconcile because they hadn't talked. I hope they have since, by the way, since the election. But they haven't talked, so I hope I can reconcile with him. He's the most historic president we've ever had, the most consequential president. He's up there with George Washington. He is George Washington, et cetera, et cetera. Saying all that, she really wants a friendship with him again. She prays for it every night. And now that people started to blame her for the election loss, what does she say? Joe Biden got out too late. So it sounds like she didn't really want to reconcile with Joe Biden, does it? It seems like there's one person Nancy Pelosi looks out for. That's Nancy Pelosi. I mean, that goes to show you. In a nutshell, have you seen in clear real time how slimy a politician could be? I'm sure you have seen numerous examples of it. But this Nancy Pelosi thing, to me, is about the dictionary definition of when you think politician kind of sliminess. That's how Nancy Pelosi has handled all this. So I doubt there will be much of a friendship unless, and as I said, they haven't talked as far as we know since he was ousted, since the coup. But if they have, I hope, and we'll never know, I hope it's Joe Biden calling her on election night or early on the 6th saying, I told you so. That's all we can. If that does happen and it comes out in a book, boy, we'll that'd be a fun interaction that we'd love to hear about. Be a fly on the wall. Let's take a short break because I'm running late. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We'll be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam is brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Yes, if you are just joining us, the view changed. The wind played in our favor. And so we've got that beautiful view back. So I didn't have to climb on the roof. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple comments from viewers. What do I think about Kennedy? I think he will drain the pharmaceutical swamp and reduce the dramatically high prices of prescriptions. Boy, that's one of the things I've got to say about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I like that he is not owned by Big Pharma. You know, Big Pharma has such a huge hand in the lobbying in Washington. So many politicians making their fortune from Big Pharma. So him not having that connection is very unique. Now, do you think, I'll pose this question, do you think he'll survive the confirmation process? Because there'll be some, I guess you'd say, wishy-washy Republicans that will, and some that are, by the way, not just Republicans, that are getting paid by the lobbyists in Big Pharma that will be able to use the excuse, well, he's anti-vaccine. They'll misrepresent completely what he's been saying, like Jake Tapper did. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there's a lot of money going around Washington because of Big Pharma. So do you think, and I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, do you think he'll survive the confirmation process? Comment from Ken. Hi, Ken. Pelosi probably thinks Biden's likeness should still be carved into Mount Rushmore, but now it should be the back of his head for tanking Harris's presidential campaign, probably. Yeah, what a, man, slimy. You just can't get over it sometimes. And sometimes, I mean, listen, we see it all the time. But Nancy Pelosi's got to be the poster child for it, right? So Trump touting his nomination of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. at that Mar-a-Lago gala last night. People like you, Bobby, as the place went crazy, he said, don't get too popular. Yeah, Trump doesn't like that, actually. I know that's a joke, but he doesn't necessarily like that. I think you're going to do some unbelievable things. Nobody's going to be able to do it like you. Trump also praised his Director of National Intelligence nominee, former Representative Tulsi Gabbard. I've always admired her, and I've admired her because she was loaded up with common sense, and it's all about common sense. He also recognized Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, whom he tasked earlier this week to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, let's talk specifically about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm going to read the statement from Trump, and then we'll go into what is being said about him, meaning RFK Jr. We do have a lot to get to this morning, so please, we're going to be rushing through a lot here. This is what President Donald J. Trump said about his nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm thrilled to announce Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. For too long, Americans have been crushed by the industrial food complex and drug companies who have engaged in deception, misinformation, and disinformation when it comes to public health. The safety and health of all Americans is the most important role of any administration. And HHS will play a big role in helping ensure that everybody will be protected from harmful chemicals, pollutants, pesticides, pharmaceutical products, and food additives that have contributed to the overwhelming health crisis in this country. Mr. Kennedy will restore these agencies to the traditions of gold standard scientific research and beacons of transparency to end the chronic disease epidemic and to make America great and healthy again. So here we go. We're going to be talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I will say that he pledged to rid federal agencies of corporate capture in his first public comments. Thank you, Trump, for your leadership and courage. I'm committed to advancing your vision to make America healthy again. We have a generational opportunity to bring together the greatest minds in science, medicine, industry, and government to put an end to the chronic disease epidemic. I look forward to working with the more than 80,000 employees at HHS to free the agency from the smothering cloud of corporate capture so they can pursue their mission to make Americans once again the healthiest people on earth. Kennedy pledged to clean up corruption, stop the revolving door between industry and government, and return our health agencies to their rich tradition of gold standard, evidence-based science. I will provide Americans with transparency and access to all the data so they can make informed choices for themselves and their families. My commitment to the American people is to be an honest public servant. Let's go. So the first time that I ever recall a Kennedy being hated by the media. We're going to talk more about RFK Jr. Let me know what you think. Let me know. I know some people still mulling over the pick of Matt Gaetz, what your thoughts are there. I've asked a question, is there anybody that concerns you of his picks? Yesterday we had someone, which I think is a very astute point, saying, Tulsi Gabbard did vote for Bernie. I think she has seen the light. I do have faith in Tulsi Gabbard in that position. But is there anybody, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is there anybody that raises a red flag for you? Just someone to keep a magnifying glass on. I think someone had a point yesterday that Matt Gaetz will have that magnifying glass on him. Yes, you've seen the attacks in the media yesterday and today. That's why I'm curious. My next question for you, do you think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Matt Gaetz will be confirmed? But stay with us. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we're having too much fun this morning. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam is brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs, as I had mentioned yesterday as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio, by the way. We'll be back on track next week with some guests for the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. It's just been such a heavy news week that I asked some of our future guests if we could postpone for just a little while, because nothing was that time sensitive, such as when we had campaign interviews. So everybody was very kind to do that. So we had too much to cover. So Trump, comment from a viewer. Wouldn't Surgeon General be a better fit for Dr. Ben Carson? Good point. I think, though, if I recall, maybe I looked it up, and I don't think I'm wrong. I think he was hoping to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. But yes, Surgeon General would be great. I hope Dr. Carson is involved in some way. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., being selected for Secretary of Health and Human Services. And it's interesting because you can see some of the outlets that don't like him. Even the New York Post, which you would deem more conservative, not happy with the pick. And I'm not going to use the names that they called him. It's just not appropriate. I'm not really sure why they're going that way. But Trump nominates RFK Jr. to head Department of Health and Human Services, tapping the vaccine skeptic to end the chronic disease epidemic. Despite his well-known oppositions to vaccination of children, Kenney insisted the day after Trump became the president-elect that he was not going to take away anyone's vaccines. If vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. People ought to have choice, and that choice ought to be informed by the best information. So I'm going to make sure scientific safety studies and efficiency are out there, and people can make individual assessments about whether the product is going to be good for them. Scott Jennings, who yesterday, after Matt Gaetz was picked, he was the one that said, are you not entertained? He's the conservative on CNN. Aaron Burnett said, President Trump has put forward Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and now RFK Jr. If they chose to block any of them, certainly RFK Jr. isn't going to be top of that list, or will he be? Scott Jennings said, I wouldn't put him in the same category as Gaetz. I think Gaetz is pretty far under the line and has a long way to go. RFK Jr., I saw a few positive vibes out of the Senate tonight. I'm not in a position to totally handicap it yet. A lot of what he talks about, there's widespread agreement with on the left and the right about if we just improve the way we ate in this country, we would solve a lot of health problems, and it would be really good. So you'll get widespread bipartisan agreement. I'm certain the vaccine stuff will be the biggest flashpoint in the hearing, and like everybody else who gets nominated, he will have a chance to answer for those statements, and the senators will have to decide whether that is satisfactory or not. On other issues, and I think this is a fair point, folks, and that's why I bring it up. On other issues, I think the pro-lifers are weird on this right now. If I were the Trump people, I would be coming up with something proactive to head that off, because I think those attacks are coming. Specifically, and commentator Margaret Hoover said specifically that he's pro-choice. Pro-life senators may have difficulty confirming him. Jennings saying yes. So on that issue, that the abortion stance could be a hurdle, or I won't say, Scott Jennings didn't say this, I will, use as an excuse by some. And it's not, I'm not saying everybody will. There will be people with their moral compass that will say, absolutely, that I cannot stand. And I totally understand that. But there'll be people looking for excuses. I didn't mean specifically the abortion issue, but excuses about his background. They'll say, well, vaccines, those people, there's a lot of money going around with farmers. So there'll be excuses being made for why they can't vote for him. And it probably won't be because, the health, obviously, or maybe even the vaccine. It'll be some major issue that they don't like. On the abortion issue, I do think that's going to be a major hurdle for him to overcome. I think somebody that's on the fence saying, well, I don't like his vaccine policy, and then they learn, wait, he's pro-choice too? Oof. He's pro-abortion? Yikes. So that's going to be a big hurdle for him to overcome. CNN's Jake Tapper on Trump, he had essentially a meltdown, if you will. He said, Congressman Kissinger, who was obviously a guest, your expectations is that they're all going to get confirmed, or do you think some Republicans might actually stand up? Adam Kissinger said, I'd actually be surprised if Gaetz gets confirmed. That's why I was surprised he resigned in the House, because he's not going to have anything to fall back on. But he'll go be a Fox News commentator or something. I do expect there'll be resistance to him. The rest of them, I do not know. Maybe RFK Jr. Here's the thing. A lot of the sane Senate Republicans, particularly those who voted to remove Donald Trump, they're up for re-election. So now it becomes a whole different ballgame. Will they resist RFK on vaccines? I don't know. But I certainly think Gaetz probably has the toughest hill to climb. And former Biden White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield said Democrats can start to lay out their own alternative, positive versions. It's never too soon to start doing that. Tapper then said, well, America, I hope you like measles. Also, I know it's Adam Kissinger, folks, so don't get me wrong. How do you like this? The sane Republicans that voted to oust Donald Trump? What do you think, Mr. Kissinger? What would you label? Because you can no longer say former representative, or you could say former representative. What would you, Mr. Kissinger, think of the over 50% of this country that voted to elect Donald Trump? Are they not sane? I'm just confused. You could only be a sane Republican if you voted to remove Donald Trump. That's the bar that Adam Kissinger has set, I guess. And I know, like many of us watching this program right now, we're saying, who's Adam Kissinger? Yes, I understand. Former congressman, very vehemently anti-Trump. So I would say it should come as no surprise that that is his position. So do you think, again, I'm posing that question, do you think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will get the nomination? I do think, to that point from Jennings, that the abortion stance could be a major hurdle. I think there are going to be many senators that are looking for something. I'm not saying this with abortion. Again, I'm not saying abortion specifically, but are looking for something to not put him in, only because there is huge money in big pharma. There are a lot of politicians. This is Republican, this is Democrat. A lot of money being taken from big pharma. So if they can, again, I want to reiterate, not on the abortion issue, but there can be some that are looking for any little thing. Maybe it's that what did he do? Dump that bear or something? They're going to look for something that will disqualify him. So I think it's going to be a tough uphill battle. Now, I know what you're saying. It was such a clear win for Trump on election night that they should do or follow his suggestions, right? It's still Washington. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that, right? I know that even John Thune, and I'm going to paraphrase him before we talk about it in a little bit, saying, it's going to be a tough confirmation hearing. It's not a shoo-in. Now, the Post editorial board says putting RFK Jr. in charge of health breaks, or let me reword that. Putting RFK Jr. in charge of health breaks the first rule of medicine. The overriding rule of medicine is first, do no harm. We're certain installing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to head Health and Human Services breaks this rule. Maybe he's sworn to focus narrowly on areas where he clearly can help, inspiring Americans to embrace healthier diets and more exercise, etc. And then they go back to his history of challenging vaccines and pushing what they call conspiracy theories. So do you agree? And there's no wrong answer here, folks. I just want to hear from you. Do you think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was a good choice, bad choice, healthy choice, scary choice, whatever the case may be? Stephen Collinson says Trump's latest controversial cabinet pick, how do you like how they word that? Latest. In a long line of controversial cabinet picks could have a huge impact on Americans' health and lives. I had this conversation with someone. Are they, other than Matt Gaetz, put Matt Gaetz aside, and maybe Peter Hegseth, only because we are not familiar, or we never thought of them being on the list. Does Robert F. Kennedy Jr. getting this nod surprise you? Does Tulsi Gabbard getting a nod surprise you? I mean, aren't these the people that, even Lee Zeldin, these were the people that were around Trump so often on the campaign trail. They were giving the speeches. Matt Gaetz, I recall, did at least one. I didn't see him in a ton of them. I think, was he at Madison Square Garden? Yeah, I think he was at Madison Square Garden. So these people that campaigned around him, very often that does lead to cabinet positions. They say controversial, but were you really surprised? I would say the only ones I was really surprised by was Matt Gaetz. Still kind of surprised by it, if I'm being honest, for Attorney General. And I was surprised by Pete Hegseth, only because we didn't see that one coming. That's not controversial to me. That was just somebody that had never even been essentially on the radar in discussions, which is very Trump-esque, very typical of Trump. So that's not in any way, shape, or form a criticism. Just not something we expected. So when they say controversial, isn't it just controversial to those that don't like Trump? Because remember, they're still presenting the news from the mindset that they hate Trump and you must hate Trump. They are, generally speaking, to the group, the less than 50% that voted for Harris. Each of Donald Trump's most provocative cabinet picks, this is against Stephen Collinson, have been a calculated punch in the mouth to experts, elites, and bureaucrats in Washington's government agencies. Yeah, one of the reasons why he was elected, right? But his decision to let Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a vaccine skeptic and conspiracy theorist, quote, go wild on health and medicines as Health and Human Services Secretary is his most shocking attempt yet at an anti-establishment teardown. Man, the media hates Kennedy now. Did you ever expect that headline? Media hates Kennedy. If Kennedy gets an opportunity as the country's top health official to promote his past claims that vaccines are not safe and effective, or to act on his desire to fire 600 people at the National Institutes of Health, which oversees many facets of health research, including vaccines, he could have a more immediate impact on the lives of millions of Americans. If, for instance, his advice or ideas led to a lowering of the penetration of vaccines in the U.S. population, a significant number of lives could be at risk. Kennedy has some views that top physicians welcome, including his calls for processed foods to be removed from school lunches, and his warnings that the food industry is marketing products that increase a chronic disease crisis. But the president-elect's decision to put RFK Jr. in charge of the health of 350 million Americans, despite his stances on vaccines that contradict the science-based research of most scientists and medical experts, is likely to ignite a new debate about the potential real-world implications of the second Trump term that will begin in January. When you say likely to ignite a new debate, let me say this sentence again, is likely to ignite a new debate about the potential real-world implications. Has that ever not been ignited? Isn't that what they have been debating since well before election night? The threat, the implications, the I told you so, he's going to be the end of the world. Remember, this is a little over a week and a half since Election Day. And the sky is falling is already begun. There is not, folks, I say this with pretty good confidence, there will not be a honeymoon phase. Now, I know there will be in the sense that there's a trifecta that the Republicans have the House, the Senate, and the White House. But when it comes to the media, and anything good Trump does will be attacked. They're already using these scare tactics about the implications of a second Trump term. This isn't what people wanted. That's the other line I keep hearing. The media and others are saying the people, and they're essentially calling them dumb. It's like what Jimmy Kimmel was saying, that I feel sorry for you, those that voted for Trump, because you just don't realize it yet, how bad it's going to be. That's what they're saying. The dummies that voted for Trump, they just don't know how bad it's going to be. I wish they could have been as smart as us to pick the genius in the room, Kamala Harris. That's what I wish. But they're not. So, unfortunately, they're going to suffer too. It's so condescending and it's so inaccurate. But yes, you just do not realize with your vote and the landslide vote, you don't realize the huge mistake you made because you're not smart enough. You are, to Biden's term, garbage. So there'll be debates among the intelligentsia. There'll be debates, reignite the debates between the brilliant people like Stephen Collinson and, the Jake Tappers and the John Boltons of the world. We got to take a break. Stay with us. We're running just a tad bit late, but we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back. Thank you to Boss Security for sponsoring our roof cam. Give them a call today. They're right in Horseheads. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. And what I'm going to do is make this the Stu Ben Senior Services Fund section of our program, because I feel like we're having a great back and forth conversation like this is an interview. We have so many comments from viewers. Here we go. First off, not sure if RFK will have any trouble in getting confirmed, but I do like him. However, I'm very sure that I don't like the left-wing cockroaches that comprise the biased media. It's getting bad, and they fan the flames, folks, of this hatred. When you, again, just showing you how smart they are, and that you as Trump supporters just don't get what you voted for. And unfortunately, I've heard this from, I'll say never Trumpers, some people that I know that are never Trumpers, not necessarily liberal, but in the sense of voting for Harris, but never Trumpers, saying, I hate to tell you, but we're seeing now exactly what we tried to warn you about. And I'm going, what? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? This is what so many people voted for. There's very few, if any, people that voted for Trump that are surprised that the people that campaigned with him got an opportunity. The people that he said on the campaign trail that he was going to put in charge of your health, that he is now being put in charge of your health. There's very few people that said that are now going, oh my gosh, I should have voted for Harris. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just nonsensical. Next up, they better not reject well, let me try it again. They better not reject RFK. The overwhelming applause was equally as loud as Trump's at all the rallies. I know. RFK better be careful about that, by the way. As Trump joked yesterday, don't get too popular. Yeah, that does sometimes cost you a job in the Trump administration. I will say, and I know I always say it's anecdotal, but I've talked to friends that did end up voting for Trump that I would have never guessed, telling me in confidence that it was the selections of people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and this thinking outside of the box and bringing people in that actually have the mindset of quote unquote making America great again. Next up, though, continuing with that comment from the viewer, rejection of RFK Jr. will go against the unity momentum. I know it will be very upsetting to me, an older, retired, longtime fan of RFK's and JFK's, back when it was not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Thank you very much. That's a very nice sentiment there. I agree. Here's a different comment from a different viewer. Pete Hegseth is an interesting choice. However, his combat experience should enable him to eliminate the woke leadership in the armed forces and put it on the road of correction. And that's really why he was chosen, is what they're saying anyway, from reputable outlets, that because of his book about woke culture in the Pentagon and elsewhere in the armed services. So, and I agree with you, it was an interesting choice just because I didn't see it. I don't think anybody really saw it other than Trump's inner circle. So I think if wishy-washy Republicans look for an excuse to not let him get through the confirmation hearing, it'll just be because of his quote-unquote lack of experience. But what they should remember is, and Scott Jennings said it, and I'm paraphrasing what Scott Jennings said, you put Trump in there to not pick Washington insiders. You put Trump in there to not do the Washington deal, that the Washington, this is how it's always been done. This is how it works. Next up, comment from Ken. I think the sad fact about our country's politics going forward is if the legacy media and legacy opinion shows aren't held liable for the lies they propagate and feed to the American people, nothing will change. The Democrats wouldn't be able to pull off the shenanigans they do if it wasn't for the legacy media and the corrupt legacy opinion shows. I also think that the compliant legacy media has evolved over the years, from the operable wing of the Democrat Party to the leaders of the Democrat Party. That's a fair point, Ken, and a lot of people ask that, is a chicken or the egg scenario. I think they really do work so well together that sometimes it is. They are the leaders of the Democrat Party saying this is what's going to work. This is what's cool. This is what's hip right now. And then I think there's other times where the Democrats come to them and say, you're going to use this talking point. This is what our talking points are right now. Also, to your point about what they do, the shenanigans that they pull. When we talk about Kamala Harris spending over $1 billion, she received $1 billion to over $1 billion, got $20 million in debt on top of that. Okay, that's a lot of money. We're going, wow, think of all the ads she bought. Think of all the free in-kind donations she received from this biased media. Think of the billions upon billions of dollars she received in positive news coverage, in negative news coverage towards Trump, because that counts in her favor. The Stephen Colbert's, the views, not just that she appeared on, but the nonstop positive talk about Kamala Harris. I mean, billions may not even be enough to put a number on it. Let's see. We got other comments coming in. I do have a break that I'll read them after the break. But yes, to this viewer who just sent in a wave, just a reminder to everyone, tomorrow's open day of gun season for deer in New York State. So if you're going out in the woods, be sure to have orange on. Let's keep everyone safe. Yes, thank you very much for that. Everybody be safe out there. Have a fun time. I'd love to hear from you on Monday, how your hunting experience went. I always look forward to those stories, and maybe we'll read some on the air, or maybe if people send in pictures. But good luck to everybody. Stay safe, stay warm. I looked up the weather earlier. I don't remember how it's going to be, but I look forward to it as much as you do. So we'll talk about it on Monday. Hopefully we all have great stories and not all just complaining about the new licenses that you had to print out yourself on paper that are going to get ruined instantly. I hope that's not all the conversation. When we come back, and wrap things up for this. Oh, by the way, and there was some other names thrown around yesterday for nominations that were put in for nomination. I mentioned them earlier on, but this is being speculated now that President-elect Donald Trump, I guess he did announce it last night that he will nominate Doug Burgum to be Secretary of the Department of the Interior. He's going to head the Department of the Interior, and he's going to be fantastic, he said, at the America First Policy Institute Gala. He said he'll make a formal announcement today. I've not received that in my email as of yet. He says he's going to help Americans slash their energy bills in half. Trump teased that another big one could be revealed on Friday as well. Burgum is going to be announced tomorrow, and we have somebody else who is probably coming up that will be announced who is a big one. We're going to do things with energy and with land interior that are going to be incredible. So something to look forward to today. We could have another big announcement. That means we'll have plenty to talk about on Monday. When we come back from break, we'll say what the incoming Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, had to say about the confirmation process, and then we'll wrap up a few things outside. Well, I'm not going to waste more time telling you what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about it when we come back. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Visit Boss Security today for all your business and home security needs are right there in Horseheads. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's get to some more viewer comments. The media needs an overhaul. We need the facts and less opinions from the news broadcast. And I love how they still don't realize that the people have spoken. They want change. They want all these outdated vaccines updated and safe for all, and would love to get more news from other countries and hear their perspective. Thank you very much. Kennedy, from another viewer, Kennedy was in a hearing in D.C. He said he had taken all his vaccines. He wants all vaccines tested first. It was on ABC this morning. 35% more kids are overweight. Wow. I know. They don't realize. That's what I'm saying. To your point, when you say they don't realize that we want change, they do realize that because we show them in an overwhelming fashion. They don't care because they're so condescending, so self-absorbed. They've got this grandiose idea about themselves that you, being garbage, to use Joe Biden's term, were not smart enough to understand what was going to happen. Look at Jimmy Kimmel. Watch that again. He said, I'm sorry for you if you voted for Trump because you're going to have it bad too and you just don't realize it. Yeah, you're not smart enough. So they realize we want to change. They don't care because they're to the point where why did we even let people vote? I mean, they didn't bother letting their own party vote. So why even because you voted against your best interest. You'll always hear that from the legacy media when a Republican gets voted in, that you voted against your best interest. So they don't care that you want to change at all because you weren't smart enough. This is the media. This isn't me saying it. This is the far, not even far left. The media, mainstream media is far left. They think that they're so much smarter than you that they almost feel sorry for you that you don't get to see, or that you don't get it. You don't see that Donald Trump is going to be the destruction of the earth, and that they just got to get through 4 years, and then hopefully they can change that. They just don't. You just don't know what you did to yourself is what they're suggesting. And a comment from a different viewer. Cannot wait to see how many Hollywood haters leave the country. Do us a favor, do not come back. Nobody cares. And that's what Douglas Murray said at the New York Post. He said celeb spotters at the nation's airports have been disappointed this past week. A whole cast of celebrities swore they would leave the country if Trump won this month's election. And yet today, the great celebrity exodus is nowhere to be seen. People have stood in vain waiting to see if Whoopi Goldberg would make good on her promise and get on a plane after Trump's victory. Ahead of this election, just like in 2016, Cher said she would leave America if Trump gets into the Oval Office, but this time Cher really meant it. This time I will leave, she told an interviewer. Can I say, without getting into this, and I know it's fun to ridicule celebs who do this, I think it is so pathetic because it's almost like the term, like this is one I was going to. If you say nothing burger, it's a nothing burger. It's almost like you're politically astute, that you know a lot, and you just said something no one's ever heard before. That's what this is like. It's about your emotions, right? I want my It's like why they're saying people are boycotting Thanksgiving, right? It's because how dare you vote against some perceived notion that I have against Trump. It's all about me, me, me. That's what this is about. You know how serious this election is? That if my candidate doesn't win, I'm leaving the country. And then when that doesn't happen, this time I'm leaving the country. It's because it makes a political point about them and the importance of them. And that's why it is laughable when, of course, they don't leave. Okay, this one threw me for a loop. I appreciate this question. A comment from a viewer. Just wondering, do you think Mike Tyson will win? I'm not making any predictions on that. I will say I think what I saw of the press conference yesterday was definitely a little bit of showmanship hype. If you listen to the radio show or a little bit on this show, you'll know I'm a big boxing fan. I think being that it's an exhibition and some of the rule changes, there's just too many factors in this equation that don't add up to know what's going to happen. It's just almost like a different game that we'll be watching. I don't know if I'll watch. I'll probably just wait for the results. Past my bedtime, so many of us have a big morning going out hunting, and that it's a little too late for us. But I will probably check the results in the morning. Do I think Mike Tyson will win? You would think he'd train to win because you're talking about a part of his legacy, but has he ever really cared about his legacy? If you look at the ear biting and some of the things towards the end of his career, some of the bad fights that he took, I don't know. Sorry, I gave you a politician answer there. But except for I said I don't know, but I didn't give you a straight, direct answer. What do you think? I'll take yours, and I'll say it right at the end if you get it in before the end of the show. How about this from the Washington Post to show you one less bias? To-go bags, passports, foreign assets, preparing to be a target of Trump's revenge. A retired U.S. Army officer who clashed with senior officials in Donald Trump's first White House looked into acquiring Italian citizenship in the run-up to this month's election, but wasn't eligible and instead packed a go bag with cash and a list of emergency numbers in case he needs to flee. That's the Washington Post, folks. That's the garbage that they are spewing. And they're trying to terrify you and scare you into thinking that it is fascism. That over half the country, that voted to, I don't know, go after these people. I don't even understand. It goes to show you how narcissistic those people are, too, how full of themselves they are, that Donald Trump even knows who they are. We are out of time. All right. I was out of time a while ago. Thank you for joining us. This has been Frankly Speaking. Have a great weekend. If you're going out hunting, have fun, safe time. I can't wait to hear how it went on Monday. And we will be back Monday morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to Monday already.